A cowboy expected a simple bride. The wild woman who arrived transformed his life. Jace Mallory tightened his worn leather gloves and adjusted the brim of his hat, squinting against the glaring light. The settlement was quiet, save for the distant hum of hover wagons and the occasional call of a sky beast circling above. For years, Jace had lived by the rhythm of the land, taming wild beasts, tending the sparse crops, and keeping the few settlers safe. Life was hard, but it was simple, predictable until today. Today, a bride was arriving. The settlement exchange had promised a calm, obedient woman to share his life. Jace expected someone quiet, someone who would follow his routines and fit neatly into the life he had built. He had imagined her in soft fabrics, moving gracefully through the small home he had prepared, her hands folding laundry as he tended the livestock. It was a vision of peace, a partnership that would be easy and manageable. But Jace's imagination was about to be proven wrong. The hover wagon appeared in the distance, kicking up a golden cloud of dust. Jace's stomach tightened with anticipation. He gripped the reins of his own hover beast, ready to guide the newcomer safely into the settlement. As the wagon drew closer, he noticed the figure standing tall at the front. No meek posture, no shy glance. Just a woman with fire in her eyes. Her hair was untamed, falling in wild curls that danced in the breeze. Her boots were scuffed, and her clothes looked sturdy, practical, and a little worn from travel. She did not seem afraid of the harsh sun or the rough landscape. Instead, she strode forward with purpose, almost as if the land itself welcomed her. "Jace Mallory," she called, her voice carrying over the wind. It was strong, confident, and filled with an energy that made Jace step back slightly. "That's me," he replied, trying to mask the surprise in his tone. "And you must be Rin." Rin tilted her head, studying him with sharp eyes. "That's right, and I hope you're ready, cowboy. I don't do quiet and I don't do tame." Jace blinked, not the introduction he had expected. But there was something magnetic about her, something that drew his attention despite the confusion swirling in his mind. I think we'll manage," he said, trying to regain his composure. "The settlement's not far from here. I'll show you to your home." Rin raised an eyebrow. "Home, you mean that little cabin by the ridge?" "It's cozy," Jace admitted, feeling suddenly defensive. "Functional, you'll like it." "Functional, huh?" she smirked, her eyes glinting with mischief. "I like a challenge." Jace led the way, his hover beast plodding steadily across the cracked, sun-baked ground. Rin followed easily, her steps sure and unhurried, scanning the terrain with an almost instinctive understanding. Jace found himself stealing glances at her, noticing the ease with which she adjusted to the uneven ground, the way she seemed to sense the subtle movements of the hover beasts grazing nearby. She was unusual. By the time they reached the settlement, the twin suns had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the simple wooden buildings. A few settlers were curious, peeking out from windows or leaning over fences, whispering amongst themselves. The arrival of a new bride was uncommon in Colony 9, and Rin's confident presence drew attention. Jace guided her to the cabin he had prepared. It was modest, with a small kitchen, a bedroom, and a living area. The windows opened to a sweeping view of the plains beyond. He had expected relief, maybe gratitude, but Rin simply walked through the space, examining it with a critical eye. "This is livable," she said finally, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "But it could use some work." Jace chuckled nervously. "I do most of the repairs myself. It's practical, nothing fancy." Rin leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "I like practical, I like simple, but simple doesn't mean boring." Jace had to laugh, a little more freely this time. He wasn't sure why, but her presence made the world feel brighter, more alive. She was like a spark in the dull routine of his life, and though he tried to resist it, he couldn't help feeling curious about her. Over the next few hours, Rin explored the settlement. She spoke with the settlers, asking questions about their daily work, their challenges, and the land itself. Everywhere she went, She brought energy, curiosity, and a sense of excitement that unsettled Jace even as it intrigued him. She noticed small details others overlooked: the slight imbalance in a hover wagon, the dry cracks in the soil near a water source, the wary behavior of the livestock. "She's different," Jace muttered to himself, watching her help an elderly settler fix a malfunctioning water pump. Rin didn't just follow instructions. She analyzed, adapted, and acted with confidence. As the day turned to evening, Jace prepared a simple meal for them. They sat outside on the porch, the air cooling with the descent of the suns, and the sky above filled with streaks of red and purple. Jace tried to make small talk, asking about her journey and her life before the colony. Rin leaned back, her gaze on the horizon. "I've traveled a long way," she said softly. "I've seen storms that could crush cities and lands that no one dared to touch. I've learned to move with the world, not against it." Jace listened, fascinated. He had lived his whole life following routines and rules. Yet here was someone who seemed to flow with the chaos of the world and even thrive in it. Her words hinted at experiences far beyond the frontier he knew. "You're fearless," he said finally, unsure if it was a compliment or a question. "Not fearless," she corrected gently. "Careful, observant, ready." Jace realized she was right. Fearless people were reckless. Rin was alive, alert, and unafraid to act when necessary. And in that moment, Jace felt a stir of admiration and maybe something more. Night fell and the twin moons rose over the settlement, casting silver light over the plains. The air was calm, carrying the distant calls of night creatures. Jace retired to his own cabin, but sleep did not come easily. His mind replayed the day. Rin's laughter, the way she had handled the water pump, her sharp, intelligent eyes, and that strange spark of untamed energy she carried everywhere. He realized something he hadn't expected. This woman, this wild, unpredictable woman, was going to change his life. Not slowly, not quietly, but like a wildfire spreading through the dry grass of the frontier. And for the first time in years, Jace felt a thrill of anticipation rather than the dull comfort of routine. Outside, Rin sat on the porch of the small cabin, looking at the settlement. She inhaled the night air, feeling the hum of the land beneath her feet. It was alive, waiting, and full of possibility. She smiled to herself. The cowboy expected a simple bride, someone who would follow his life and fit neatly into his world. But Rin had no intention of fitting in. The frontier was wide, dangerous, and untamed, and so was she. And so the stage was set. Jace and Rin, two lives destined to collide, would soon discover that the plains of Colony 9 had room not just for survival, but for transformation. The twin moons shone above, and the wind whispered of adventures yet to come. The morning sun rose slowly over Colony 9, painting the plains in pale gold. Jace Mallory stepped outside his cabin, stretching and rubbing the sleep from his eyes. The wind carried the faint smell of dust and dry grass, and the distant hum of hover beasts could be heard grazing in the fields. Life on the frontier was simple and predictable, but today something felt different. Rin was already up. Her cabin door was wide open, and she moved outside with a light, confident step. Her hair caught the sunlight, and she smiled at the morning breeze as if it were an old friend. Jace watched from his porch, feeling a mix of admiration and unease. "Good morning, Jace," Rin called cheerfully. "I think the plains need a little life today." Jace raised an eyebrow. "Life? You mean chores?" She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle storm. "Chores can be fun, you just have to know how to see them." He shook his head but followed her anyway. Rin had already spotted a small group of settlers struggling with a collapsed irrigation channel. The water was pooling in the wrong places, threatening the crops they had planted weeks ago. Normally, Jace would have spent hours assessing the problem, calculating carefully and slowly moving supplies. But Rin didn't hesitate. She ran toward the workers, examining the channel with quick, sharp eyes. "Move the stones there. dig a small trench here. Use that lever to lift the pump. Her instructions were clear and precise, and the settlers followed without question, amazed at her energy and confidence. Jace watched, impressed despite himself. She didn't just give orders, she noticed small details that others overlooked. She adjusted the direction of the water with clever use of stones, strengthened weak points in the channel, and even suggested moving crops slightly to higher ground. In under an hour, the irrigation problem was solved. One of the settlers, an older man named Brigg, shook his head in disbelief. "I've been fixing channels for 10 years and never have I seen it done like this." Rin grinned. Maybe 10 years is enough to see something new. Jace felt a strange warmth in his chest. The woman he had expected to be quiet, obedient, and simple was anything but. She was creative, daring, and full of energy. And she was changing everything he thought he knew about life on the frontier. The day moved quickly. Rin explored the settlement, asking questions about every small detail, the source of their water, the way the soil retained moisture, even the design of their hover beasts' pens. Every answer she received, she analyzed carefully, offering suggestions that often seemed minor but made big improvements. "You have a way of seeing the land that is unusual," Jace said as they walked back toward his cabin after lunch. "I see it the way it wants to be seen," Rin replied with a wink. "You can't just move across it blindly, you have to listen." Jace frowned slightly. "Listen. Feel the wind, watch the soil, watch the animals. They tell you things if you pay attention." He thought about it for a moment. He had spent years surviving on the frontier, but he realized he had often ignored these small signs, relying only on routine and strength. Rin's way was different, alive, intuitive, and surprisingly effective. By afternoon, a small group of children gathered around Rin as she demonstrated how to safely ride the young hover beasts. They laughed as she guided them, her hands steady and firm, yet gentle enough to teach without fear. Jace noticed the way the children looked up to her, trusting her completely. "You make it look easy," he said quietly, watching her from a distance. "It's not easy," she replied without turning. "It's about knowing what to do and having confidence to do it." The sun was high, beating down on the dusty plains, when a problem arose that would test both Jace and Rin's abilities. A heavy supply wagon, overloaded with fresh crops, was stuck in a deep rut near the edge of the settlement. Normally, moving it would require multiple settlers, ropes, and hours of careful maneuvering. Jace had begun planning the effort, calculating angles and weight, when Rin stepped forward. "Let me try something," she said simply. Jace hesitated. "It's risky." "Nothing worth doing is risk-free," she interrupted. Rin climbed atop the wagon, scanning the ground beneath it. Then she pointed to a series of small stones and natural dips in the earth. With quick, clever movements, she instructed Jace and two nearby settlers to place the stones strategically and push in unison while she guided the wagon with her voice and gestures. It moved. Slowly at first, then with surprising ease, the wagon rolled free of the rut. The settlers cheered, astonished. Jace rubbed the back of his neck, unsure if he should be angry at her audacity or impressed by her ingenuity. "I didn't think it could be done," Briggs said, "but she made it look easy." Rin laughed, brushing dust from her clothes. "Nothing is impossible if you think carefully and act confidently." As the day faded into evening, the settlers gathered for a small communal meal. The twin moons rose over the horizon, casting silver light on the plains. Rin sat beside Jace, her energy still radiating like the sun itself. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," Jace said honestly, breaking the quiet between them. "You challenge everything I thought I knew." "I hope so," she replied with a mischievous smile. "Life on this planet is harsh. You can't rely only on strength or routine. You need creativity, courage, and a willingness to take risks." Jace leaned back, thinking about all she had done today, the irrigation, the children, the wagon. She had breathed new life into the settlement and even into him. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of excitement, a spark he hadn't known he was missing. The night was calm, filled with the soft hum of the plains. Jace and Rin walked together to the edge of the settlement, looking out over the endless golden fields. "You really are wild," Jace said softly. "And you're finally starting to see it," Rin replied. "But wild doesn't mean careless. I know how to survive and how to help others do the same." Jace nodded, a new respect forming in his chest. She was more than a bride, she was a partner, a force of energy and intelligence that could make the settlement stronger. He realized he would have to learn from her, to embrace the wildness she brought with her if he wanted to keep up. For the first time, he didn't mind the thought of change. The twin moons hung high, reflecting on the quiet plains, and the air was filled with the soft whispers of the night. Rin sat on a nearby rock, looking out at the horizon with a thoughtful expression. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start exploring beyond the settlement. There's more to this land than just what we see every day. It has secrets, and I want to know them all." Jace felt a shiver of excitement. Life on Colony 9 had been predictable, safe, and simple. But with Rin, it would become something new, something alive, something worth fighting to understand. He smiled at her, feeling a thrill he hadn't known in years. "All right," he said, "we'll explore. But don't get lost out there. This land can be tricky." "Tricky?" Rin laughed softly. "I was born for tricky." As they walked back to the settlement together, Jace realized he had been wrong to expect a quiet, obedient bride. Rin was wild, untamed, and full of energy, but she was exactly what the frontier needed. And perhaps, in a strange way, exactly what he needed too. That night, as he lay in his bed, Jace thought about the day, about Rin, and about the possibilities that awaited them. The plains were vast, the challenges many, and life would never be simple again. But it was alive, and with Rin by his side, it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary. The twin moons shone down on Colony 9, and the wind carried the soft whispers of adventure. The frontier had welcomed a new force, a force that would reshape the lives of everyone who lived there. And Jace Mallory knew, deep in his heart, that the wild woman who had arrived in his life would never let it be ordinary again. The morning sun had barely risen over Colony 9 when a subtle tension began to stir in the settlement. Jace Mallory rode along the dusty paths, checking on the hover beasts grazing in the fields. The animals were restless, more alert than usual, and Jace couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Rin appeared beside him, seemingly out of nowhere, her hair catching the first light of the suns. "Do you feel it too?" she asked, her eyes scanning the horizon. Jace nodded. "Something's not right. The air feels heavier today, and the animals aren't acting normal." Rin dismounted and crouched near the ground, touching the soil lightly with her hands. "The land speaks, Jace. There's a shift, something approaching. Not dangerous by itself, but it could cause trouble if we're unprepared." Jace frowned. He had survived many storms, dust quakes, and other natural challenges, but Rin's way of sensing the land still amazed him. She could read subtle signs he might never notice. "Trouble?" he asked cautiously. "Yes," Rin said, standing straight. "Something big is coming. And we need to get ready." By mid-morning, the settlement's residents had gathered near the central plaza. Rin walked among them, assessing, observing, and giving instructions. She didn't yell or demand. They listened because her confidence was infectious. Jace joined her. "What do you suggest?" he asked. Rin pointed toward the outer edge of the settlement. "We need to protect the fields and the water supply. There's a high windstorm forming in the northern canyon. It won't hit us directly, but it could knock over structures, scatter crops, and frighten the animals. We can't stop it, but we can prepare." Jace nodded, impressed again by her clarity. "Then let's do it." The settlers worked together under Rin's guidance. They reinforced walls, tied down roofs, and secured the hover beasts in the strongest pens. Rin moved swiftly between groups, offering small, clever solutions that made a big difference. Use these stones to create wind channels, she instructed, pointing to heavy rocks lying in the fields. They'll slow the wind before it hits the crops and move the smaller plants closer together. It creates natural protection. Hours passed, and the twin suns climbed high. The wind from the northern canyon began to pick up, rustling the dry grass and lifting dust into the air. The settlers could see the shadow of the storm moving across the plains, and tension rose like a tide. "Keep calm," Rin said firmly. "The storm is strong, but it's not unbeatable. Nature has its rules, and we just need to follow them." Jace felt a strange mix of worry and admiration. He had always relied on strength, on quick action, and on predictable routines. But Rin relied on observation, creativity, and understanding. And in this, she was teaching him something invaluable. The storm hit the outer fields first. Gusts of wind rolled in, shaking crops and lifting dust in swirling clouds. Some settlers panicked at first, but Rin's calm voice guided them. "Hold the poles, work together, move slowly and carefully." Jace followed her instructions, helping to anchor a large cart that threatened to tip over. It was hard work but coordinated. Slowly, the worst of the storm's force passed without major damage. The settlers cheered quietly, impressed by Rin's clever solutions. "She saved us," Brigg whispered to Jace, shaking his head in disbelief. Rin smiled, brushing sweat from her brow. "We saved ourselves. I just helped you see the way." By afternoon, the storm had passed, leaving behind flattened grass, dust-covered surfaces, and a few minor damages, but nothing catastrophic. The settlers worked together to clean up, encouraged by Rin's leadership and practical solutions. Jace felt a swelling pride, not just in her but in the settlement. They had faced the storm together, and Rin had shown them that thinking ahead, observing the land, and acting with confidence was just as important as strength. Later, Jace and Rin walked along the ridge overlooking the plains. The twin suns were lower now, casting long shadows across the settlement. "You handled that storm beautifully," Jace said, his voice filled with respect. "I've faced storms like that before, but never so calmly, so cleverly." Rin shrugged, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I've seen storms worse than this. The trick isn't to fight them blindly. The trick is to see what they'll do before they do it, and work with them instead of against them." Jace thought about that. It was different from anything he had learned growing up. He had always relied on courage and brute strength, but Rin had taught him something new. The mind could be just as powerful as the body. As they returned to the settlement, a group of children ran up to them, laughing and pointing. Rin knelt to greet them, showing them a small trick she had learned during the storm. How to use the wind to lift a lightweight kite just right so it danced in the air without tearing. The children's laughter rang through the settlement, bringing a sense of relief and joy after the tense morning. One of the settlers, a young woman named Lyra, approached Jace quietly. "I don't know how she does it," she said. "She makes it all seem easy, even the dangerous parts. She makes us believe we can handle anything." Jace nodded, understanding what Lyra meant. "She's different," he said softly. "Not simple, not ordinary, and she's teaching us something important." Rin overheard, smiling. "Different is good," she said. "Ordinary doesn't survive here." The rest of the afternoon passed with small repairs, lessons for the children, and preparation for the next day. Jace watched Rin interact with everyone. She was patient, energetic, and full of ideas. And through it all, she remained herself, wild, free, and unafraid. As night approached, the settlement gathered for a small dinner. The twin moons rose over the horizon, bathing the plains in soft silver light. Jace and Rin sat together, sharing food and stories. "You're full of surprises," Jace said, shaking his head with a small laugh. "I thought I knew what life here would be like. I was wrong." "Life is full of surprises," Rin replied, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "That's what makes it worth living." Jace thought about the storm, about the way the settlers had worked together under her guidance, and about how much he had learned simply by watching her. He realized that the frontier wasn't just about survival, it was about creativity, courage, and trust. And Rin had taught him that. The night air was cool and still. Jace and Rin walked together to the edge of the settlement, looking out over the plains. "There's more to this land than we've seen," Rin said softly. "Tomorrow, I want to explore the northern canyon. I think it hides some secrets and maybe some challenges we can learn from." Jace hesitated for a moment. The canyon was dangerous with unpredictable winds and rocky terrain, but he knew that with Rin leading they could face it. "All right," he said finally, "we'll explore. But we stick together, no taking unnecessary risks." "Agreed," Rin said, her eyes sparkling, "but we won't be bored, I promise." As they walked back to the settlement, Jace felt a thrill he hadn't felt in years. The frontier was full of challenges, but now it was also full of possibility. With Rin by his side, life would never be simple again, but that was no longer something he feared. Later that night, as he lay in his bed, Jace thought about the day. He had expected a quiet bride, someone to keep his life orderly and simple. Instead, he had found a partner, someone who challenged him, inspired him, and reminded him that life could be thrilling, even on the harsh plains of Colony 9. Outside, Rin sat on the porch of her cabin, looking at the stars. She felt the land around her, alive and waiting. She knew that the northern canyon held secrets, and she was ready to discover them. The cowboy expected simplicity, but she had plans to bring life, energy, and adventure to every corner of his world. And in that quiet night under the twin moons, the frontier whispered promises of discovery, creativity, and transformation. The shadow of the canyon loomed in the distance, and with it, new challenges awaited, challenges that would test not just strength, but cleverness, courage, and the human spirit itself. Jace and Rin were ready to face them together, learning from each other, growing stronger with every step. The twin moons shone high above Colony 9, and the wind carried the soft whispers of adventure. The wild woman had arrived, and she was already changing everything. The twin suns rose over Colony 9, painting the plains in pale gold and orange. Jace Mallory stood at the edge of the settlement, his eyes fixed on the northern canyon. The place had always been dangerous, with jagged cliffs, unstable paths, and sudden gusts of wind. But today, the canyon seemed alive in a new way, as if it were waiting to challenge them. Rin approached quietly, carrying a small satchel filled with tools and supplies. She looked calm, confident, and ready for anything. "Ready to explore?" she asked, her voice carrying excitement that made Jace smile despite his nerves. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jace replied. He glanced at the canyon's edge, feeling a mixture of fear and anticipation. The land was unpredictable, and he knew they would need all their wits to navigate it safely. Together, they stepped onto the rocky paths leading into the canyon. The ground crunched beneath their boots, and the wind whispered through the cliffs, carrying the scent of stone, dust, and distant water. Jace felt a thrill of excitement. This was no ordinary day, no ordinary challenge. And Rin, with her confident steps and keen eyes, was the perfect partner. "Watch the rocks here," Rin said, pointing to a narrow ledge. "They shift easily. Step lightly and feel the ground before you put your weight down." Jace followed her advice carefully, noting the way she moved with balance and awareness. He realized that her wildness wasn't recklessness. It was careful observation, intuition, and adaptability all working together. He had always relied on strength and courage, but now he saw the power of mind and perception. As they ventured deeper into the canyon, they came across a small stream cascading from a rocky cliff. The water sparkled in the sunlight, but it had carved small channels in the ground that made the path tricky. "This could be useful," Rin said thoughtfully. "We can use the water to help us move supplies and even guide animals if needed, but we need to understand it first." Jace nodded. "How do we do that?" Rin knelt by the stream, dipping her fingers into the cold water and tracing its flow. Look at the curves, the dips, the speed. Nature always has a pattern. Once you understand it, you can work with it. They spent the next hour examining the stream, marking the best paths, and discussing how it could affect the canyon's environment. Jace realized he had never taken the time to truly observe the land. Rin was teaching him patience, analysis, and strategy, all skills that were just as important as physical strength. Further along, the canyon narrowed and the wind grew stronger. Loose rocks tumbled down, and the path became steeper. Jace's heart raced as he followed Rin, trusting her guidance completely. "Here," Rin said, pointing to a natural shelf along the cliff. "Step there and use the ledges as handholds. I'll guide you." Jace did as she instructed, feeling his confidence grow with every careful step. He realized that he had always feared the unknown, but with Rin by his side, he could face it and even enjoy the challenge. Halfway through the canyon, they found signs of wildlife, tracks, feathers, and broken branches. Rin knelt, examining them closely. Humans aren't the only creatures using this canyon. If we observe carefully, we can learn a lot about the land and avoid trouble. Jace watched her, impressed. She wasn't just exploring, she was reading the canyon like a living map. Every detail mattered, and she knew how to use that knowledge to move safely. Suddenly, they came upon a narrow bridge of rock stretching over a deep chasm. The wind gusted, making it sway slightly, and loose pebbles threatened their footing. Jace froze, his hands gripping the edge tightly. "Step carefully," Rin said calmly. "Feel the balance, move slowly and keep your weight low. We can do this together." Jace took a deep breath and followed her instructions. Step by step, he crossed the bridge, his confidence growing with each careful movement. When he reached the other side, he realized something profound. He had changed. He was no longer the rigid, cautious man who had expected a simple, obedient bride. He was learning to trust, to observe, to adapt, and it was exhilarating. Rin crossed next, her smile bright and encouraging. "See, the canyon isn't so frightening if you respect it and pay attention." As they moved further, they discovered a hidden alcove filled with unusual rocks and small pools of water. The area seemed untouched, a secret part of the canyon that only a few had ever seen. "This is incredible," Jace said, marveling at the sparkling pools. "I've never seen this before," Rin nodded. "The land has secrets. If you're willing to look, it can teach you amazing things." They spent the afternoon exploring the alcove, taking careful notes and observing the wildlife. Jace realized that every challenge, every obstacle was an opportunity to learn, and Rin was a master at turning danger into discovery. As the sun began to set, the wind died down, leaving the canyon quiet and still. Jace and Rin made camp on a safe ledge, lighting a small lantern and preparing a simple meal from their supplies. "You've changed the way I see this land," Jace admitted, breaking the silence. "I thought I knew how to survive here, but you've shown me there's more to it than just strength and routine." Rin smiled softly. "Survival is only part of life here. Living fully means learning, observing, and daring to explore. You've got the courage, Jace. You just needed to see it in a new way." Jace felt a warmth in his chest. He had always been proud of his toughness, his ability to handle the frontier. But now he realized that true strength came from more than just muscles. It came from the mind, from partnership, and from courage tempered with wisdom. They ate quietly, the canyon around them glowing in the golden light of the setting suns. The air was calm, and the world felt alive with possibilities. After dinner, Rin suggested they watch the stars. The twin moons reflected off the pools in the alcove, creating patterns of light that danced across the rocks. Jace sat beside her, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly. "And you're not what I expected either," Rin replied with a grin. "But that's a good thing." Jace smiled. For the first time, he truly understood. Life on the frontier was no longer about predictable routines or simple survival. With Rin, It was about creativity, partnership, and embracing the unknown. As the night deepened, they prepared to rest, but Jace couldn't shake the feeling that the canyon had more to teach them. He looked at Rin, seeing her determination, her confidence, and her wild spirit. He realized that the woman he had expected to be simple had transformed him. He no longer feared change. He no longer feared the unknown. With Rin by his side, he felt ready for anything. The twin moons shone brightly above the canyon, illuminating the path ahead. Jace and Rin knew that the frontier would continue to challenge them, but they also knew they could face it together. The wild woman had arrived, and she had not only changed the settlement, she had changed Jace Mallory. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new lessons, and new discoveries. And for the first time, Jace was excited to see what the frontier had in store. As they drifted into sleep, the canyon whispered around them, alive with wind, water, and hidden secrets. The adventure was far from over, and the journey of transformation had only just begun. And so, under the twin moons of Colony 9, a cowboy and a wild woman faced the frontier together, learning, growing, and embracing the endless possibilities of the world around them. The twin suns rose slowly over Colony 9, casting long shadows across the plains. Jace Mallory stood at the edge of the settlement, looking out at the wide expanse of golden grass and rocky cliffs. Life had changed in ways he had never expected, all because of the arrival of one extraordinary woman. Rin appeared beside him, her hair catching the sunlight and her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Are you ready?" she asked. Jace nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be. What's the plan?" Rin pointed toward the northern canyon. "There's a hidden plateau I've been wanting to explore. If we can reach it, we can survey the land beyond, see what's possible for our settlement, and maybe even discover new ways to improve life here." Jace felt a thrill of anticipation. The frontier had always been about survival, but with Rin, it was about discovery, creativity, and growth. He realized he had never truly seen the land, not until she had arrived. They set out together, moving carefully through the canyon paths they had explored before. The terrain was challenging, with narrow ledges, steep slopes, and shifting stones. But Jace no longer felt fear as he once had. He trusted Rin's guidance and relied on the skills she had taught him: observation, patience, and clever problem-solving. "Here," Rin said, pointing to a large boulder partially blocking their path. "We can use it to our advantage. Place your weight carefully and use the lever of this branch. It will shift enough to create a safe passage." Jace followed her instructions, amazed at how simple and effective her solutions were. The boulder moved just enough to clear the path, and they continued onward, climbing higher into the canyon. As they reached the hidden plateau, a breathtaking view opened before them. Rolling plains stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with small clusters of rocks and shimmering streams. The settlement below looked tiny, almost fragile against the vastness of the land. "This is incredible," Jace breathed, his eyes wide. "I've never seen anything like it," Rin smiled. "The land is full of surprises. Sometimes you just need to climb a little higher to see them." They spent the morning exploring the plateau, noting areas where crops could thrive, where water could be collected, and where structures could be built to withstand the winds. Every discovery was an opportunity, every observation a lesson. Jace realized that this was more than an adventure. It was a way to secure the future of the settlement. With Rin's guidance, they could improve life for everyone, making the colony stronger, safer, and more resilient. Around midday, they spotted movement in the distance, a small herd of wild hover beasts grazing near a stream. Rin knelt quietly, observing their behavior. "We can guide them toward the settlement," she said softly. "They'll be a valuable resource if we approach carefully." Jace watched as she moved with gentle confidence, guiding the creatures step by step. The hover beasts responded to her patience and calm, following her without fear. Jace joined in, feeling a deep sense of connection to the land and its creatures. By late afternoon, they had led the herd safely into a natural enclosure near the settlement. The settlers were thrilled, marveling at the animals' calm demeanor and Rin's skill in guiding them. Jace felt proud not just of the success but of how much he had learned by watching and working alongside her. "That's amazing," Briggs said, shaking his head. "I've never seen anyone handle them like that." Rin laughed softly. "It's not about handling them. It's about understanding them." As the twin suns began to set, the settlement glowed with warm light. The wind carried the scent of dust, grass, and distant water. Jace and Rin stood together, looking out at the plains they had explored and the settlement they were helping to build. "You've changed everything," Jace said quietly. "The settlement, the land, even me. I never imagined life could be like this." Rin's eyes softened. "Change isn't always easy, but it's what makes life meaningful. You've learned to see the possibilities, Jace. That's the most important thing," he smiled. "And you've shown me that there's more to strength than just muscle. There's creativity, patience, and courage too." Rin nodded. "Exactly. Humans are remarkable. We survive, adapt, and thrive, sometimes in ways no one expects. That's the real strength of our species." Jace felt a surge of admiration and gratitude. The woman he had expected to be simple had transformed his world. She had taught him to observe, to think, to trust, and to embrace the unknown. And through her, he had discovered a new sense of confidence, purpose, and excitement. That night, the settlement gathered for a celebration. Fires burned in small pits, and the settlers shared stories, laughter, and simple meals. The twin moons shone overhead, casting silver light across the plains. Rin moved through the crowd, helping where needed, offering guidance and sharing her insights. Jace watched her, feeling a deep sense of pride. She had become a part of the settlement, a force that inspired everyone around her. After the festivities, Jace and Rin walked to the edge of the plains. The twin moons reflected off the streams below, and the air was calm and still. "You've made this place better than I ever imagined," Jace said. Rin smiled. "We've made it better, together. That's the point of life here, not just surviving but thriving as a community." Jace nodded, understanding fully for the first time. The frontier was harsh, unpredictable, and challenging, but it was also full of possibility. And with Rin by his side, he knew they could face anything. "Do you ever wonder what's beyond the plains?" he asked, gazing at the distant horizon. "All the time," Rin replied. "There are always new lands, new challenges, and new discoveries waiting. That's what makes life exciting." Jace felt a thrill of anticipation. The frontier had once been a place of routine and survival. Now, it was a place of discovery, growth, and adventure. And he knew that with Rin, every day would bring something new. As they returned to the settlement, Jace realized that he had changed in ways he hadn't expected. He was no longer the cautious, rigid cowboy who had feared the unknown. He was observant, patient, and willing to embrace challenges with creativity and courage. And he had learned to trust, not just in Rin, but in himself. The next morning, the settlers gathered to discuss plans for expanding the colony. Thanks to the exploration of the plateau and the guidance of Rin and Jace, they had new ideas for irrigation, animal pens, and crop placement. Every suggestion was met with excitement, and the community worked together with renewed energy. Jace felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had expected a simple, obedient bride, someone who would follow his routines. Instead, he had found a partner, someone who challenged him, inspired him, and helped him see the world in a new way. And in doing so, she had transformed the settlement and the lives of everyone in it. Rin approached him, a small smile on her face. "You've come a long way, Jace," she said. "You've learned to see beyond what's in front of you, to think creatively, and to embrace challenges." He nodded. "And I couldn't have done it without you. You've taught me that life is about more than just surviving, it's about thriving, learning, and growing." Rin's smile widened. "Exactly. And the frontier has a lot more to teach us. Are you ready for the next adventure? Jace grinned. With you, always. As the twin suns set over Colony 9, the settlement glowed with warmth, hope, and possibility. The plains stretched endlessly, full of challenges and opportunities, waiting for humans to explore, understand, and thrive. Jace and Rin stood together, looking out over the land they had helped shape. They knew that life on the frontier would always bring new surprises, but they also knew they could face them, together. The wild woman who had arrived in his life had not only transformed him, but had transformed the settlement, the land, and the future. And in the quiet of the night under the twin moons, Jace Mallory realized that he had found more than a partner. He had found a companion for life, adventure, and discovery. The plains of Colony 9 stretched before them, wide, untamed, and full of possibilities. And with Rin by his side, Jace knew that they were ready for anything the frontier could offer. Life was no longer simple. Life was extraordinary. And for the first time, Jace wouldn't have wanted it any other way.